Imagine being told your punishment is not just death, but a method so profoundly strange and symbolic that it will echo through history for centuries. You won't be hanged, shot, or beheaded in the usual way. Instead, you'll be strapped to the mouth of a cannon, and with a deafening roar, your body will be obliterated, scattered in every direction. This isn't a scene from a macabre fantasy novel. It was a real form of execution used by the British Empire. It's a method designed not just to end a life, but to send a chilling message about power, order, and the consequences of defiance. To understand why a supposedly civilized empire would resort to such a visceral and, to our modern eyes, utterly disgusting form of punishment, we have to journey back in time and explore the complex world of colonial rule, where control was maintained not just through laws and armies, but through powerful, terrifying symbols. The British Empire, at its height, was a global behemoth, a sprawling network of colonies, dominions, and protectorates. Maintaining control over such a vast and diverse population was an immense challenge. The British were always a minority in the lands they ruled, and their authority rested on a fragile balance of military force, political maneuvering, and crucially, psychological dominance. Punishment, in this context, was more than just a legal consequence for a crime. It was theater. It was a public performance designed to demonstrate the absolute power of the crown and the futility of resistance. The methods used were often chosen for their symbolic weight, their ability to shock, and their capacity to instill a deep, lasting fear. This wasn't about simple justice. It was about upholding an imperial order that seemed, to its architects, to be the natural state of the world. One of the most infamous and visually shocking of these punishments was blowing from a gun. This practice was most notoriously used in British India, particularly in the aftermath of the Indian Rebellion of 1857. The mechanics were brutally simple. The condemned person, typically a mutinous soldier or rebel, was tied to the muzzle of a cannon with their back against the opening. When the cannon was fired, the explosion instantly annihilated the person's body, sending fragments flying across a wide area. There was no body left to bury, no final rites to perform. It was a method of complete and utter obliteration. But why this specific method? Its symbolic meaning was far more potent than its physical effect. In many Indian cultures, particularly for Hindus and Muslims, proper funeral rites are essential for the soul's journey in the afterlife. Cremation for Hindus and burial for Muslims require a complete body. By blowing a person from a cannon, the British were not just killing them, they were attacking their very soul, denying them religious peace, and casting them into a state of spiritual limbo. It was a punishment that reached beyond the grave, a calculated assault on the deepest cultural and religious beliefs of the colonized people. This made it a weapon of immense psychological terror, a warning that defiance would lead to a fate worse than mere death. Historical accounts from the time reveal the chillingly calculated nature of this practice. After the 1857 rebellion, British officers openly justified it as a necessary deterrent. They believed that the specter of being blown from a cannon would terrorize potential rebels far more effectively than a simple hanging. The visual spectacle was part of the design. These executions were public events, carried out before crowds of soldiers and civilians. The horrifying explosion and the grim task of cleaning up afterwards were meant to be seared into the memory of all who witnessed it. One British officer, George Carter Stent, described the scene with a chilling detachment, noting the terrible and disgusting, yet most effective nature of the punishment. The message was clear. The empire's power was absolute, and it would not hesitate to use the most extreme measures to preserve its rule. Another form of punishment, while less explosively dramatic, was equally steeped in cultural and psychological meaning: transportation. This was the practice of exiling convicts to distant penal colonies, most famously in Australia. From the late 18th to the mid-19th century, hundreds of thousands of British subjects were sentenced to transportation for crimes ranging from murder to petty theft. On the surface, it might seem less barbaric than a cannon blast. No blood was shed in the sentencing, but transportation was a punishment of profound social and emotional violence. It was, in effect, a social death. In an era before modern communication, being sent to the other side of the world was like being erased from existence. Families were torn apart, often forever. A person sentenced to transportation lost their home, their community, their identity, and any hope of returning to the life they knew. The journey itself was an ordeal, a months-long voyage in cramped, unsanitary ships where disease was rampant. For those who survived, arrival in Australia meant a life of hard labor under a harsh penal system. It was a slow, grinding punishment designed to break the spirit. The social function of transportation was twofold. First, it physically removed undesirables from British society, a convenient solution to rising crime rates and overcrowded prisons during the Industrial Revolution. But more importantly, it served as a powerful deterrent. The fear of being cast out, of being sent to an unknown and terrifying land at the edge of the world, was a potent tool for maintaining social order back home. Stories of the horrors of the penal colonies circulated in Britain, reinforcing the idea that any crime could lead to this terrible fate. It represented the ultimate loss of belonging, a severance from the very fabric of society. The punishment wasn't just the hard labor, it was the loneliness, the hopelessness, and the permanent exile. It turned the vast, unexplored territories of the empire into a psychological prison, a place where the unwanted were sent to be forgotten. This was a different kind of disgust, not of gore, but of the cold, bureaucratic cruelty of uprooting a person's life and casting them into oblivion. These punishments, blowing from a gun and transportation, reveal a core truth about the nature of imperial power. They were not just about punishing individuals, they were about managing populations and reinforcing a hierarchy. They were carefully chosen to exploit cultural vulnerabilities and instill a sense of overwhelming powerlessness. By targeting religious beliefs or the fundamental human need for community, the British Empire could assert its dominance in ways that went far beyond the battlefield or the courtroom. It was a system that relied on the idea that some lives were less valuable than others, and that the order of the empire was a cause for which any level of cruelty could be justified. Looking back at these practices from our 21st century perspective, it's easy to feel a sense of moral superiority. We see them as barbaric relics of a bygone era, but the logic behind them, the use of fear, public shaming, and dehumanization to control people, is not something that has vanished from the world. We still see echoes of it today, in different forms. Think about how modern states use surveillance, or how public shaming on social media can destroy a person's life, creating a kind of digital transportation. The impulse to create outgroups and justify harsh treatment of them is a persistent part of the human story. The punishments of the British Empire, in all their calculated cruelty, serve as a stark reminder of what can happen when one group has absolute power over another and believes its own sense of order is more important than the humanity of others. They force us to ask difficult questions. What lines are we willing to cross in the name of security or justice? How do we ensure that our own systems of punishment are not just about retribution, but about upholding the dignity of every individual? The history of empire isn't just a collection of stories about the past. It's a mirror that reflects the enduring complexities of power, morality, and what it truly means to be civilized. What do you think? Do these historical punishments reveal more about the people who were punished, or the people who designed them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this exploration of history thought-provoking, please consider subscribing for more stories that challenge us to think about the past and its lessons for today.